We're here today with Dr. Katie Sveinson, who is an assistant professor in the Mark H. McCormick Department of Sport Management in the Eisenberg School of Management at the University of Massachusetts. And really why she's here is because she's a 3-time alumnus of the University of Regina and in the Faculty of Kinesiology and Health Studies. She earned her Bachelor of Sport and Recreation Studies in 2012, Master of Science in Kinesiology in 2014, and her PhD in Sport Management and Sociology of Sport in 2019. So welcome, Katie, to our podcast to showcase our different alumni.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So we'll talk a lot more about like your experiences here, but I want to start with a little bit of like what you're doing now at the University of Massachusetts and kind of give us a little bit of a life of what's it like an academic who's from Canada working in the United States. So maybe a little bit of like, what do you teach? What are you doing research on at the University of Massachusetts?
Yeah, it was an interesting adjustment, I think, doing all my education in Canada and moving to the States and kind of learning a different education system and different kind of approach to building classes and things like that. So now I'm in my 6th year, so I think I'm getting the hang of it. So I teach sport marketing predominantly. I've taught sport consumer behavior, and I've taught a PhD class as well, which was pretty cool to do. And then I'm actually going to be teaching a women in business class next semester, really geared towards helping women understand what it's going to be like as they enter the industry and give them some tools. So looking forward to that one. And then when I'm not teaching, I'm doing research. And so I focus on looking at experiences of women as sport fans, obviously in the work that we've done, and also looking at kind of how marketing to girls and women is both effective and ineffective at times. And so right now, kind of moving into a bigger project of research with some work with Formula One and Formula One Academy, which is really exciting to be able to kind of get the industry connection and insights and be able to both create some academic papers, but also some relevant industry work too.
So you'd mentioned a little bit about how like the education system is different in the United States. So can you give us some examples of where, like, is it the structure? Is it the content? What's different?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit is the grading system as well, right? So I think, here I'm so used to a 50 as a pass, and there in some classes it's a 70. So understanding kind of grading, also like expectations, but what is kind of the norm of grading was an interesting piece. I also think, again, spending all my time here in kinesiology, I'm used to having quite an array of students that when I taught here of some who were sport management or sport rec or maybe therapeutic rec, and then some who wanted to be, in a physical trainer or whatever. So I think there was more kind of variety of students that I had here, and I think I'll have predominantly students who are majoring in sport management, and then I might have a few who are marketing majors or in the business school. So it's kind of a different dynamic of student as well. That is an adjustment.
So you mentioned that you did teach when you were here as a student, and you talked a little bit about the diversity of students. So and I know that those comes with some challenges, but what are also maybe some of the benefits of that, of like recognizing we are a very interdisciplinary faculty? So from your perspective and thinking back at that time, like what were some of the maybe benefits of that?
Yeah, I think I experienced this both as a student and then when I was teaching is that, I think what you were able to do is understand content in a variety of contexts, So as we talked about, I think of when I took your, I think diversity in kinesiology. And so you have folks who have different backgrounds or more taking classes more in kind of hard sciences, and then some who are more in social sciences, but those concepts are relevant regardless of context. And so I think being able to hear other people's perspectives enhances your understanding of that. And I think in classes, I felt that way. And then when I was teaching, it was nice to see the way students could find their way to connect to content based on where their kind of interests lied. But that kind of enhances the whole learning experience when you can learn from your peers and in the context, and that allows you to really fully grasp kind of what's going on.
And you have that opportunity, I think, to stretch yourself to apply it to different contexts, so you're not just in a pretty singular one. So that's also an interesting challenge. It's a challenge, but it's an interesting challenge. What are maybe some of the benefits then, like now that you have, they're primarily sport management or management students? What can you do with that maybe you wouldn't be able to do when it is more of a diverse student body?
I think what's interesting there is, the students are so involved, and they are really interested in working in the sport industry. They are in the internships. They are really hard workers in that space. And so I think when I teach content, I can teach it a little bit more narrow to specific kind of contexts, or really bring in like a heavy business focus because they're taking a lot of business classes. And so kind of gearing it into really trying to make it applicable for them if they go and work in the sport industry. And that kind of knowing that these folks are interested in working in some business of sport capacity, and instead of more of the variety of maybe working as a trainer or athletic trainer or things like that. So I can really narrow in on how do they learn skills and apply the skills in the classroom so that they have an understanding when they get in the industry of how to do some of these things.
And I suppose it's probably also to understanding that there are different contexts even in sports. So you talked about you do research in Formula One, which is very different than some of the things that might exist here in Canada. So you kind of have that specificity that you can get into of how those different leagues and industries look like in sport as well.
Yeah, and we have I think that program is also, it's. I think we just celebrated 50 years a few years ago, so that was like a strong alumni network that they also tap into. And I think, similar to here in celebrating like the U of R's 50th, is that as the alumni network grows, the opportunities for students to connect with those folks and learn from them, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, cool. So one of the things, maybe just to transition into it, is again maybe the reflection of. So you're at the University of Massachusetts. Previously, you were at Temple in Philadelphia. What's it like teaching at those two institutions versus, again, when you were here? Well, and again, some of that was you were a student here, but you also did teach. How are those different, or how are those the same?
Yeah, I think I'm like trying to think back to all the times I taught here. I think in some of the ways. I think the difference is maybe in the way that the students, I would say maybe at Temple and also in UMass, it is, I think, a very specific group who have a very specific goal of, again, the sport management students wanting to be a GM, wanting to be a marketer, wanting to really head in a singular kind of direction. And so you have a group of people who are all kind of on that same path in the class. And being able to bring in industry. And I think what I was able to do, even though I wasn't at Temple, I was at Temple for 3 years, but tap into their alumni network and really try and enhance that connection with industry, particularly in Philly, where there are multiple pro sports teams. And so, and I think when I like teaching here, the other thing I think that's very interesting is like the way that sport is kind of different. So here I think I did a lot more nonprofit examples. Kind of connecting to sport culture in Canadian and Saskatchewan contexts, and then obviously moving and trying to think, okay, what's the context here? What are these students interested in doing? Where do they want to work? And how can I bring in content and examples or folks from the industry that relate to what they want?
And I think it's important to understand that it's not that we don't have professional sport in Saskatchewan or in Western Canada, but the opportunities are more limited. But what we do have is a lot of the community-based, nonprofit, and just understanding that's what exists here. And that is very different, obviously, than when you're in Philadelphia or in Massachusetts and some of the other, not necessarily specifically in Amherst, but close by, that you would have some different. The way the sport is delivered is different.
Yeah, and I think that, I think a lot here, it was really nice is because there were so many kind of nonprofit organizations, or even being just much more familiar here with what leagues and what organizations operate in Saskatchewan, which ones are Canadian, and being able to pull like a variety of those in, and then moving obviously to a place like Philly where I don't know those community organizations. So having to do the work to try and find local examples to try and connect with. And again, knowing that even in Philly and at UMass, that we have students who are from, kind of all over the states as well. So I might try and use a local example to connect with them, but then it's like that might hit half the class as well. So trying to find that variety.
Yeah. It is always a challenge when you don't really know in the classroom where they're coming from. So you're trying to get the best, but it doesn't always work. So I'm going to bring it back to here. So again, I said that you did all 3 degrees here, which is not typical. And sometimes there's even the comment that you really shouldn't do that. That's probably not the best. What was the benefit for you of doing all 3 of your degrees at one institution, and maybe even specifically at U of R?
Yeah, I think I was kind of reflecting on this and knowing this kind of question was going to be coming. And so I think my history with U of R actually like goes quite deep because my dad had worked here for 25 years. And so I came to the U of R on weekends with him sometimes, you know, when I was 5 or 10. And I kind of felt like in a way that I recognize is privilege that I felt very comfortable at the university because I would come, I kind of knew the space. I really enjoyed being on campuses, and even now I really like to visit university campuses wherever I go. So I think that, you know, U of R kind of runs deep in my family. And then in coming here, you know, I kind of wanted to follow his footsteps. I was interested in psychology at the beginning. And then I actually, and this will date me, I guess, but I had one of those catalogs, a course catalog book. And I thought, you know, I liked the classes I was taking, but they weren't really resonating with me as much. And so when I saw sport management and kind of this business side of sport, I thought, oh, I think this is really more my area. And so I transferred into Faculty of Kinesiology and Health Studies, and I felt like it just clicked. Like, I was like, this is it. This is the classes I want to take. I really was excited by the content, by the culture, by the opportunities. And so for me, I think, you know, U of R was something, it wasn't really a question. I knew that I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I was going to kind of stay here and go to U of R. And then I think what happened was during my undergrad, I was able to develop relationships with you, with, you know, Dr. Hoeber, with, you know, the staff and all the faculty. And I felt like this was a place that could really support me in my journey. And I kind of knew, I think at that point, I wanted to be a professor. So thinking of doing my master's, my PhD. And for me, I think what the U of R offered was kind of in a way, like our faculty offered individualness in the program and flexibility. And I think what I like about kind of the environment of the U of R is that you can see all these different programs can work to their strengths, and all the different faculties can function in the ways that work, you know, the best for them. And so as I went through and really did myself have questions of, is it a good idea to stay and do all 3 degrees? I was here for like 11, 12 years. So is it you know, the questions of, is it too much of the same? But I've never stopped learning, and I never stopped being challenged. And so I have no regrets of doing that. And I think it really is the best decision I could have made.
That's awesome. That's good. So maybe reflecting on some of those things, what were some of the opportunities that you got within the faculty that allowed you to grow, whether those were internal opportunities or what were some of the external opportunities that also allowed you maybe to connect with other people? Because that is often the criticism, is if you do all 3, like, you know, you were my student for your master's and your PhD and your honors. And so that is a question, but what were some of the things that you took advantage of that allowed you to learn from other people other than myself?
Yeah. I think one, obviously in the undergrad program, was the fact that there was a variety of faculty members that I took courses from, and so being able to, you know, get a variety of insights. And also I think of, you know, a few people who I think really impacted the way that I wanted to be a teacher as well. And in that classroom, I think of Brenda Rosso-Kimball is like someone who really stood out in my head as like just a really exceptional educator, and wanting to know that I wanted to have that kind of connection with my students. And so I think having the variety as an undergrad to have multiple different faculty members was really helpful in my own career. And then I think the things as I kind of continued on into my master's was also that you know, I think through going to conferences and getting support from the faculty and from the undergraduate society in KHS to be able to go do those things and connecting with other people in my field. And so I was able to, you know, email, get on projects, you know, do work with other folks. And even when I first started, it was Tony Lichty, who's now at Illinois, who I started kind of doing a lot of research with. And so I think I had many opportunities to engage in research with a bunch of different faculty members. And so that expanded my knowledge, my skills. And then, but I think the reason why there's a few reasons. The reason why I wanted to stay a lot was as an advisor, you were phenomenal. And I think that you just really allowed me to make my own decisions. And I think that was very important. And then the flexibility of the program. I felt like I really could take courses that were relevant to what I wanted to do. It really allowed me to hone in. I really was able to do a lot of research and gain a lot of skills and have a lot of mentors here. And so I think even though it's one place and, the same kind of people were around, I think I got the most support I could have had from everyone who was here. And I felt that all the way through.
That's nice to hear. And I do think in speaking to other colleagues that one of the things that I think is unique about U of R is the opportunities to gain some of those other experiences, like whether you said being an RA for other people, teaching classes. I know you served on committees. And then sometimes in other places, grad students they're really protected from some of those things. And I know that there are some challenges with that because it can add time. But I think for you, I really saw that all those things just added different skill sets, different networks, different knowledge for you that proved to be very beneficial when you came out.
Yeah, and I think one thing that very much stands out to me was the opportunity to be on the scholarship committee for the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research, and something like that where as I prepare for my career, I'm going to have to do service work, committee work. I'm going to teach, and I'm going to do research. So really, I think my education that I got here was really an insight into what the job is actually like, and I was able to kind of practice and get that experience before I went out there.
Right. So one of the other things that sometimes you might hear is that maybe students have to go to larger institutions and larger urban centers to really get those good academic jobs because you're more connected, you're surrounded by other people. But again, you come from the University of Regina. What do you think helped you with that? And you're at UMass, you're very successful, have a great career. So what was that about? Or is that a myth? Is that a myth that you don't have to come from U of T and UBC to actually be successful?
Oh yeah, and I think there's a few things. One is you get what you put in, right? So I think for me it was taking advantage of the opportunities that were here and that were present. And I think I did get opportunities that I probably wouldn't have got at bigger institutions. I enjoy being in this faculty where everyone is kind of close. It's smaller. I felt like I knew everyone, and that way, if something came up, they'd think of me. They might say, oh, that's a good idea. Let's add Katie to this project, or let's see if she'd be interested in connecting over this. So that familiarity amongst everyone, and I think a willingness to help you develop was, I think, something that you might miss, and again, assumption, but you might miss at bigger institutions. I also think that I think there are so many opportunities and in terms of like being able to connect with your faculty, being able to connect with your peers. I think the other nice thing about Regina, and I think Saskatchewan, is, I think everyone you're kind of 1 degree separated from a lot of people. Yep. And I think the benefit of that is you do gain those connections through everyone that you kind of meet and your other peers in the class. And so to me, I think that it really doesn't matter what my degree name says. What matters is what I was able to do with the time that I was here. And I was in an environment that was incredibly supportive, that really fostered a sense of drive and commitment and standards. And I was able to really benefit from that. So I know for me with job applications, both on my end and when other people, as I now go through job applications, rarely look at where they went.
Right.
It really is what were they able to do with that time.
Yeah, which is something, again, that I talked about a lot with you, is that idea that it's what you produce in the end, not where you actually come from. But you also have to take advantage of those opportunities, because if you don't, then I think you do hamper yourself. You don't get those networks. You're not making your name for yourself. So you have to look at that, and you have to put yourself out. You have to go to these places. You have to go to conferences. But again, if you've got something to show for it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you come from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So given that this is, the 50th anniversary for the university, and you were talking about how, your dad was here for a long time, and you were starting to come here when you were quite young, what's changed at U of R over your, and I know it's a lot, but what has changed in your time here, and now coming back here too as well. You haven't been here for a while. What's different?
I think coming back in the university gives me a lot of feelings and like a lot of emotions. It was my home and where I was all the time for 12 years. And so I think what I do see in kind of evolution, I was thinking about this yesterday, is I think I'm really proud to come from a faculty that is willing to make adjustments when they see it's needed, willing to try something new and be innovative. And, obviously in the time that I left, we went through the COVID pandemic. And so that was a challenge for all higher education institutions. And so when I think of or talk about what was done here and how did you adjust during the pandemic for student needs and trying to create that connection and experience for students, that this willingness to be innovative, a willingness to adapt, a willingness to change things, to kind of always make it better. And I think I think what happens sometimes is, especially in places like academia or higher education, it can become really like static, right? That there's resistance to change, or a lot is happening with technology or all these things. And I think what I'm really proud of and of seeing in the growth of the program and the university is the willingness to make the change and the willingness to be innovative, to try new things, all for really the betterment of students and the faculty. And so I think that's a really cool thing to observe. And then, of course, the new faculty offices.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, this is very surprising. But I think that, investing in the spaces you need, changing classrooms and structuring things differently throughout the whole university, just trying to keep evolving and developing and not really just being complacent.
Yeah, well, we were even talking about this place, previously was a small classroom where it was used by athletics, and how it's evolved into something that's actually really, a really cool space that we can do some of these innovative things now, like having these podcasts. So this is just one of those evolutions that we're seeing. Couple more questions. So do you have some highlights about your time, either as an undergraduate student, as a master's, as a PhD student here, that you'd like to share of kind of some really good memories from the University of Regina or the Faculty of Kinesiology and Health Studies?
Yeah, I think, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is really some of the friendships I was able to make in my undergrad program of, you come in and you don't really know these people, and you come from, I did French immersion, so a lot of my my elementary school and high school, I was with the same group of people. We kind of went all the way through, and then you come into a class of 130 people, and it's kind of overwhelming. But I think when you got into smaller classes and I started to see the same people and we started to connect, I think the way that, you find the peers in your class, you make friends with your classmates, and then, you work in projects with them, and then you go to the OWL and you celebrate those projects. So I think I really enjoyed the people that I met. I still can think of them. I'm still Facebook friends with them. I think that they really enhance the experience, right? Working with them, celebrating with them, being frustrated with them was really something I think I'll always kind of enjoy and cherish. And I think during my master's and my PhD, a lot of maybe the good memories was really related to kind of the support that I was getting. And I think because I was able to do research on Saskatchewan Roughrider fans and on women fans and work that a lot of people could relate to, I was really grateful that there was public interest from that. And I think that was a really exciting thing to feel like, oh, people care about what I do, and people would reach out. And, if I did something on CBC, then people would email and say, I know exactly what this feels like. And so I think, again, I felt like a unique opportunity here was to be able to kind of ingrain in the community that work and share that out. And I think that was, another highlight.
Well, I think it's really interesting to see, too, how something so successful like your master's really was, and you got the public attention for it. It really is a seed that kind of germinated into something that you're like, it is your career. This is what you do. And to have gotten such a positive, again, not every student is going to get media attention, but again, you hit upon something that the public was interested, or the Rough Riders were interested, or media was interested, and kind of realizing, also thinking back at that time, that was kind of unheard of. People didn't really talk about women as sport fans. And you think about now and how common it is, like, that's kind of cool to reflect upon that.
Yeah. And I think it was, so many things of like, I think what was really cool was I was able to use my own experiences as a woman who was a fan and connecting with obviously doing a lot of readings of what was going on in kind of the academic literature. And then knowing that when I just talked to other women, they were like, oh yeah, that happens to me all the time. Right. And so I think it was really cool to realize I can do this work on stuff that really resonates with folks, but also in, when my line of work makes an impact, like a theoretical impact as well of how we understand gender in these male-dominated spaces. And so, I think I will forever feel grateful for that and being able to have people still, even with fan clothing work that we've done, I might write something. I wrote something in a local newspaper at UMass. We're doing a series, and this woman emailed me, and she's like, "I can't tell you how frustrated I am trying to find clothing." And I think all those times when it just resonates with people, it's kind of the extra motivation.
Yeah, and just realizing that it still exists when you're saying it's still happening, that they haven't figured it out about how to make clothing for a range of women. Again, I know we've talked before many times about the pink, and I was sharing how I've seen pink again. And I think I have to realize some people like the pink. That's fine. That's okay. But it's still, I think so much of it's still stereotyped. It still maybe doesn't fit well. It's not really tailored. That there's still room. There's a lot of room practically to grow from this and theoretically to grow from this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's something that I think can just continue to expand. Of everyone might experience these frustrations of trying to support your team and not having the item that you want to express yourself to do that. And so I think it's exciting to think of something that maybe a lot of people can resonate and do understand, and then try to develop, theory and practical implications from that at the same time.
So one of the things I just want to end with is, again, you're in the United States. I've traveled there before too, and people are like, you might say Regina, and people are like, what? Where is that? So what do you share? What do you share when someone asks, you're from Regina, Saskatchewan, or you're from the University of Regina? What are the things that you point out or talk about?
Well, when I do my classes at the beginning of the year, I always include a map, and I have a pin where Regina is, because I like to let them know this is where I'm from. I like to educate them a little bit on Saskatchewan and Regina. I do bring in examples from like the Saskatchewan Roughriders of whatever's going on. And, I think what I like doing as well is that, the states are kind of, particularly in sports, just really a beast of all these professional leagues and so much going on there that I like to remind them, like, there are other places, right? There's the Canadian Football League, there's the hockey teams in Canada, of these kind of other contexts to consider in a more of a international and ideally global sense than just what happens in the States. So I think I really enjoy being able to provide that to my students. And again, a lot of that is being exposed to it in my classes here, and then having to do the research of sport organizations here to bring into my classes when I was teaching here as well. So I let them know where it is. I try to bring in the sport examples. And I think I tell everyone all the time that I just, like, my program, and I would say, like, my master's and the PhD was the best thing that could have happened to me. It was the best place for me. I was so supported, but I was able to be so directed in my efforts. And I think there are other programs out there where, you take a lot of classes and you don't get to do as much research, or, you are you're on a grant, which happens all the time, but you might be doing a piece of a project that is something bigger for your dissertation, then you go out and you do something else. But I think for me, what I always talk about with U of R and the faculty of KHS is the flexibility that I had to really follow what I wanted, and not only be encouraged to do that, but be very supported to do that I was able to pick the classes that made sense to me. I was able to really dig into being a researcher. And those opportunities, I think, are few and far between. And so I think that's, for me, why I always will feel grateful for the U of R, for the faculty, is feeling like I was exactly where I should have been to be able to kind of get into this position to be successful.
That's great. And again, I think we make of it what we want to make out of it, and that's an important part. Is there anything else that you want to share? Anything else that you think that I hadn't asked, or that you want to share about your time or reflections about being a student at U of R?
Yeah, I think we covered a lot, but I think I really do hold this place very dear to me. You know, I think, again, it was 12 years of my life. It was a lot of the development, you know, going into from my 20s into my 30s here as well. So spending so much time here. But I think I really do just feel like there is a lot of care in this program. There's a lot of care for how it's developed, for the courses and the way they're structured. I also think that there is just so much support that was available here. And I think that, again, sometimes maybe people are afraid of small programs and they don't think they have the resources. But to me, this small program is what gave me the foundation that I needed to be successful. And so, of course, that might come with drawbacks of, you know, there wasn't many other PhD students in sport management, so I didn't really have a cohort, but I was able to make it elsewhere. And so I would, you know, if I was given this choice 500 times, I would pick it every single time. I love this. I love the university. I really love the program. The staff, the faculty, everybody who works in KHS is just all working towards a betterment of it. And I think that's a really unique place to be.
Thank you, Katie. It's so nice to hear that, and I think to have your reflections shared in that way. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.